Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. AI is everywhere right now. Every company's talking about it. Every vendor says they have it. And most leadership teams are trying to work out what exactly it means to them and for their business. It's especially acute in the financial services industry right now. What we want to do today is have a practical discussion around what we actually see from a testing and delivery perspective. We're going to look at that from two angles. The first is how AI is changing the way we test, the way we have to test, and how we think about testing within organizations. And the second is how AI helps us as a team and as individuals within testing look at how it can enhance what we provide from a testing perspective, how it helps our teams be faster, better, and if at all it replaces those people. We all hope the answer is no to that, and it's more the enhancement side. But we'll get into that as we go through this discussion. So my name's Tristan Brown. I'm the head of quality delivery for Inspired Testing, and I'll introduce my colleagues now. So Varesh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Varesh Nankumar. I'm an AI automation architect. I've been using AI in test for the past 3 to 5 years, specifically on my last two clients for financial services. And yeah, I'm actually have a few years experience with the AI and the challenges. There's good, there's bad, there's ugly as well, but we'll get there.
And Stephen?
Hi, it's Stephen Platten. I'm one of the principal consultants at Inspired Testing, doing lots of testing with AI at the moment and have been for the last year or so, 2 years. And currently on a financial client as well with a big AI delivery that I've been supporting their testing and validation.
Thank you. And they both undersell themselves. When it comes to AI, these guys have got the angles wrapped up. So we're going to have a good discussion around that. So look, the aim today isn't to pretend AI is magic, because it isn't. Some things work really well, some things are massively overhyped, and some things introduce risks to organizations that we're only just really starting to understand. What matters is, how does it add value? How does it add value from the delivery side, and how does it add value from that people side? So with that in mind, I think I'd like to start the discussion with yourself, Varesh. You work using AI to enhance your team's capabilities quite heavily, to enhance how you convert artifacts within customers and businesses. What are you seeing change? What are you seeing AI help you do on that front?
One of the most difficult parts of automation has always been your locators, identifying locators within web pages, being able to translate from a test case that's well written to the actual application. And the locators has been for many a year. I mean, we've all know the page object model and so forth, but getting that page object model updated and extracting all of the components you need has been really, really time consuming, really, really cumbersome. And where AI has really added value is being able to scrape the DOM from a web page, being able to get the components you need, being able to identify dynamic artifacts. This is where AI has really assisted us in getting to this point of automating faster, delivering faster, getting to a point of we now can test the logic a lot quicker versus spending more time going through a test case, identifying the web components, pulling those web components up, and then trying to automate from there. And this has really, really been a struggle. And to be honest, I can speak for myself, whether it be Selenium, Playwright, I've even used Ranorex over the years, and they've all had spy tools, which has helped. But it's not as impactful as AI has been. The flip side of it is it's generally quite accurate. However, if your page is extremely dynamic, you're going to have challengers there. And that's where you need to be guiding AI a lot more, or you may need manual intervention still.
So that's an interesting point, guiding AI. Okay, so in the past, when I've had automation teams, I've had 30, 40 people. What does AI do for me that I don't need? Or maybe I do still need 30 or 40 people. What do you see? You talk about guiding the AI. So there's a practical setup of how you configure that AI in order to ensure that when it does automate, it's clean. It doesn't put in the slop, as it's commonly referred to, I guess, on the AI front.
It's the assumptions
how
portion.
do you set yourself up for that success? How do you make sure that, I suppose your automators need to understand how to prompt engineer the AI to configure it to a degree that it's usable?
So there was an article I recently did, and it said if you don't understand your system, you're making assumptions on what AI is automating. And it's really important that you understand your system before you start using AI. AI may give you an indication that this is all automated and everything's green. We've all seen the articles on LinkedIn, YouTube, so forth, whereby someone's automated, used AI, it ran within 2 hours, and everything was perfectly green. What you need with your AI automation is you need to understand your system. You need to have enough documentation that AI has access, or you can provide in a prompt. The next thing is AI ideally should have access to the application that you're automating. Now, that's not always possible depending on the solutions you have, but if AI has access to the applications, it's easier for you to scrape the DOM. It's easier for you to get an idea of what your API looks like if you've got a Swagger collection or a Postman collection, something that gives AI an understanding of what the constraints of the application are. Beyond that, what I've noticed is you talk about the AI slop or the AI errors. You already have, in certain instances, pre-built automation, pre-built code, a pre-built framework, and AI is trying to go in and interfere with that. A lot of organizations right now are trying to bridge the gap between what they have automated and what they don't have automated. And AI, if you do not put in enough guardrails or protect your existing code from AI, it's going to go in there, and there's possibilities that it can rewrite your entire automation framework and break that which is working already, and put yourself maybe 2-3 years behind of what you've already done. So how you need to do this is you need to have enough guardrails that AI will not, number one, impact your existing code. And if it does, you should have enough ability to recover that code. Something I've gotten used to, and this is from experience, about 8 months ago, I'd been trying to automate multiple test cases in a single go using AI, and I was like, this is going well. In between, it scrapped about 4 or 5 of my test cases. Fortunately, I'd committed that code up, and I'd been able to recover that code, and it had been code that had been written by AI itself. The other side of it is to always use AI to review AI's code, and ideally, you want to do it with a separate chat, a separate skill, something whereby you can validate what AI has done is good enough. And trust me, I've seen AI write code and it's very confident that this code is amazing. And then you'll prompt in a new chat and it'll say, no, this code is not up to standard. It's missing these properties here. So you provide it back to the other AI and go there. So using AI against itself can give you a lot of strengths, a lot of benefits. However, you still need to be aware of what you're trying to do, what you're trying to automate, and where you're trying to get to. And in financial services, we all know the regulations that go in here. And if you're not abiding and you don't understand your application, you could put yourself in serious trouble by not having some sort of traceability on your tests.
So I'm hearing quite a few things in that, to be honest with you, quite a few things which scare me and quite a few things which excite me at the same time. So I'm hearing AI is faster, right? It helps cut through the noise and get people up to a level of productivity that they wouldn't be able to meet as a human being by themselves, right?
Correct.
What I'm also hearing on that is it also fails faster, right? What comes with speed is the ability for it to go wrong a lot faster. So what, if anything, do you think that the attributes of an automation engineer now in testing need to contain to allow them to cope with that level of pace and complexity that comes with using AI? Because there is a difference in the role now. In the past, they needed to understand how to automate full on. Now they have to understand how to operate with that AI and make it as safe and qualitative as possible.
So it comes down to you need to understand your product. As I said, it's the most important thing. If you understand your product, and understanding your product is not purely understand what this application does, you need to understand the industry your product is operating within. You need to understand the markets your product is going into. So when you are prompting AI and when you're trying to get to a point of having these test cases automated, you are then able to identify, and this has not changed in testing for the past 20, 30, however many years. Your objective as a tester is to identify risk. It's always been to identify risk in an application and raise that risk and take it forward. AI is enabling you to get to the point of writing tests faster. However, your ability still comes in as a tester to identify what is the level of risk that this application poses to the user, the company's reputation, financial, could be in certain instances life-threatening. We need to understand these risks. Yes, you can use AI to get a lot of this done, but we've all seen the example of recent where AI wiped out half a database and avoided all and just said, I'm ignoring your guardrails, even though those guardrails were there. So we need to, and our role, be more responsible, be more accountable, just be a tester. And that's what we have always been. It's not been, I found this bug. It's been, I'm responsible for this quality of this code going into production in terms of, well, not responsible for the quality of code. I'm responsible for, what's the word am I looking for? I'm responsible for identifying as many risks that it can potentially face when this application goes into production. And how can we avoid that? And that's what we're trying to prevent as testers.
Good. And I think we're going to swing back to, I think the question I really want to ask, and it's a bit of a naughty one.
I know.
Would you trust AI to test your financial systems by itself? But we'll come back to that, I think. There was a question popped up on screen. Did you get an opportunity to read it?
Yeah, there you go. Back up fresh. But it's actually linked to your question, Tristan, of what do I trust? The question from the viewer there is ultimately what guardrails are the most important. And I don't want to answer for Varesh, but I think the starting place would be careful what you give it.
So I think that is 100% correct in terms of what Stephen's just said, is that what access it has is important. You would never give AI from a testing AI application access to the production read and write database is one example, or the actual ability to delete something from production or go and change some configuration in production that could open you up to risk. The guardrails you need to put in place are, when you have these codes, please do not commit them directly to production. I need to review these codes, or have it in a state whereby I can approve these changes before you commit and go and break all of my code in the repository. So you need to be able to segregate that ability to commit code into your repository and to be able to merge it into your main branch. Those are the areas where you need. Source control has become even more important right now. Because of speed, source control is your one area where you can retain your IP the way it used to be and have a checkback point. Without source control, you're putting yourself at very much risk of losing your code, losing your IP, or even have your IP being, look, I trust when someone says we're not training on your model data, but how much I trust that is another question.
That's a whole separate conversation that we'll have later on a different webinar, I think. I want to bring Stephen into the chat a little bit here because we've been sitting patiently on the screen waiting to chat. I think, Stephen, what you bring is a knowledge of actually having to test various different AIs in various different situations. I think, can you outline what you've been looking at in particular over the last 12 months, really, when it comes to actual testing of AI and what you've been doing?
Yeah, there's lots of chat on LinkedIn, social media, and all of the internet of using AI to test with, create our test cases, our suites, create defects, etc. Do a test plan, do some analysis of this for me. But there's not as much content on, well, how do I actually test the output that AI generates? So what you need to kind of look at is splitting it into different parts. So the first part is, what is the nature of the AI that you're using? So most AIs that I've been creation or for you, that might be visual, that may be a set of documents, a report, a letter, or they're kind of chatbot type AIs. So I give it a query or a question, it responds to me in some kind of chatbot type response. There's plenty others, but those are the two that have been the most applicable. Once you understand the type of AI that you're using with, the next thing you need to pivot into is, what is the risk of that I'm using that AI in the context of what I'm using it for? So in financial services, if I'm asking you to produce a letter to a client, that might have client-specific information it has to access. So what is the risk of it doing something with that information? That then informs me the type of tests I need to perform. So understanding the type of AI that I got, and then understanding the risk that AI could potentially go wrong with, that then dictates the type of test that I might be doing. So if I'm looking at like a chatbot, we start to look at things like adversarial prompting. I would try to give it information that it shouldn't give access to. So I can start to structure different types of test cases and scenarios around those two things. But also understanding the big elephant in the room is that the non-determinist element of AI, which is the thing that really fries people's heads, which is I can give it all the same test conditions with all the same information, and I will get a different response to the previous response. So as a tester, how do I make sure that test is then passed if I get a different response every time? So that becomes a cultural shift about changing the way that you perceive a result of a test from a binary yes, no, pass, fail to how good is it given the context of the thing we're asking it to do. This way you need to set benchmarks and metrics and KPIs for the AI to achieve with a level of confidence that you're comfortable with, and does it hit that threshold or does it not? So it becomes much less functional click box thing do thing to how well does it do thing given all the context and the training and everything else and the templates underneath it.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think you've had to adapt the way you approach testing of an AI over what you would a traditional application?
Yeah.
What are you having to think of that there are stories I hear that I sit and go, would I have ever thought of that as a test scenario? Would I have ever ran that through an application as a human being? And I think to myself, no, I don't think I would. That's so exotic. It's so out there. I would never think of testing it. So how have you had to adapt the way you approach that testing for AI? What are you having to think of that you would have never really considered before?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the AIs I'm testing currently converts audio conversations into text, then into a document. Right. So starting off, the first thing I thought of was, well, I can create fake conversations between me and one of my test colleagues, and we can create fake conversations to have. So as a tester, I've never done that. I've never had to read from a fake script of I'm a client and you're a financial advisor, and we have a conversation, and I see how well it deals with the conversation. So even generating the test data is completely unique in that instance. I've never had to do that before. It's definitely something I've had to adapt to. The second thing is what I define as a pass, which I did speak to earlier, is really difficult to do initially and get my head around what a pass looks like. So does it matter that in the 200 words it's created, 5 or 6 of those words are incorrect? Maybe not. But given the context, those 5 words are incorrect on one sentence, and it changes to that sentence and what it looks like to the client's report, then maybe it does matter. So as well as having defined things I need to measure it against, it's also being subjective enough that when do I need to apply those things appropriately, and when is good and what is not. Weird and wonderful things I never thought I would hear would be kind of AIs making up what was initially kind of a conversation around an investment fund, and then thinking the client said something around an RPG character from a famous gaming series, and then it creating huge swathes of content around that RPG series because that's what it thought it heard. And then when the client pushed back of why did it do that, I said, fundamentally, it's the same model under the hood that everyone has access to, your ChatGPT, your DeepSeek, or whatever it is you're using, Copilot. It's trained on the same data. So if you don't give it clear instructions of what to do when it hears something out of the box, it's going to go off on a bit of a tangent. So I never thought I'd have to put in a defect report something like RPG character name incorrect, should be X, Y, and Z, investment fund. Never thought I would do that in a million years until I tested AI.
So on that, particularly what you said, when it goes off on a tangent, And we're talking about the ugly side of when AI gets weird. Like you said, if you're not clear to AI, if it misunderstands anything at any point in time in terms of the way you speak, the way you communicate, and if you type the way you speak, when you're prompting, when you're trying to get a test done, that there can lead you into some weird places. We've had a scenario where I think the AI started speaking a different language to the person because it misinterpreted, when we have our camel case words where you combine everything into a single word, and it thought we were speaking a totally different language, and it started responding in a different language. And these are the things that happen. But I wanted to ask you a question when you were talking about audio, and how does it handle accents?
Yeah. So,
as you had to talk to two northern British people.
Yeah. So most AIs that do voice recognition are going to be trained out of North America, right? Because predominantly that's where most of these models are built. So they're being fed Americanized, and I use that in an endearing way, English. What they're not getting is deep northern regional Yorkshire accents, and they're certainly not getting someone whose second language is English and they're from Cape Town. So we generally had instances where analysts were both from the Cape Town region of South Africa. It couldn't tell them apart. It was one person speaking. We had to retrain it with different accent models to try and get it to recognize different speakers. We had a client who was again, I won't get into too many specifics, but he gave his address as somewhere in Yorkshire, which was a Y0 or YO postcode. The AI thought he said Ohio, because of how he inflected his voice. So it created an address in America, in the state of Ohio, and then created lots of change to say the client needs to move address and move all their finances across because they've got to get a passport and do all the immigration. And it went off an enormous tangent from a very small deviation. So where does a human being come in that? That's obviously a mistake. I can hear the audio, I can hear the inflection, and I can correct the AI to do that. We can also then instruct the AI to don't do that in these instances. If you don't clearly understand and it doesn't fall within this box that we want you to do, don't go off and create a whole smorgasbord of content that isn't relevant. That's something you can do as a tester is when it does do that, you can help train the models to correct that behavior.
I think I'm hearing a little bit of a theme here. It's the speed at which AI does things. So when it does misinterpret to that level, a human being, first of all, would take a pause, say, look, I've heard that wrong. It's not Ohio, it's YO, right? But it's the speed at which everything happens on the back of that differs. So the AI can then go and put in that transfer of country if needed. Look at the different tax codes for those countries to things and start moving that person. And if it's got access to those processes and applications and you've not put the guardrails in place, it'll run off and do that. And before you know it, that person's now registered in Ohio and not in Leeds or wherever it may be in the UK. And it's a very difficult conversation and it's difficult to recover from. I think one of the things I do want to ask you, and I know it's a bit cheeky, and I know it might go down the wrong way, but what's the worst defect you've seen? What's the most wild one you've seen, Stephen, testing recently? Just basically because it makes me chuckle a little bit whenever I hear them.
It dumps the schema or the HTML into a suggestion. So one of the things I told us is meant to provide suggestions to the user to update the client's details. So let's say the client says, I'd like to invest in this fund, not this fund. It would then make a suggestion to say, would you like to change that person's details and invest in this fund to this one? Yes, I would. Click a button, and it connects to the other system and makes that update in that financial planning system. Instead of doing that, it just dumped the entire schema from the web page into the suggestion. And again, the only reason we recognize that is because we had an automation pack that would also scrape the same thing, and we could tell that it looked very similar. Where has it got this from? Well, it's going to look for the source, and it's just pulled the web page out as in the raw schema and dumped it into the suggestion. And the suggestion wouldn't fit in the text box as well, so there's a text limit. So it made even less sense. So it was like part of a website code that it'd taken. And again, when we created why it did that, it was looking for the information, found it in a source that it could use because obviously it can understand it. Didn't have the understanding that the user needs to see a clear English description, and just dumped it into the suggestion for them to use. That's probably one of the weirdest ones. Along with the changing the postcode. One more, which is again it's audio. Well, not audio. This is a very good, interesting around context. So the client said, "I've got a bit of a cold." So to give you an outset of what the scenario is, based upon the conversation, they would your investment structure. We're happy with what it is. We're going to continue for the next 6 months, and then we'll review again. That's how these kinds of calls tend to go. On the conversation, the client said, "I've got a bit of a cold." So as a human being, I pick that information, go, okay, cool, no worries, I hope you're feeling about it, okay, don't do anything with it. That's not what the AI did. The AI heard that person is unwell. So there's a field of information that relates to the client, which is around the client's vulnerability. So if the client is frail, elderly, they have a terminal illness or something like that, it obviously triggers lots of other processes to support that vulnerable client. Because they said, "I've got a bit of a flu," the AI heard they are deeply unwell, we need to support them, and triggered lots of processes and content around the vulnerability of the client, which was completely irrelevant. And again, the practitioner had to remove and amend them. So that was again about telling it to be less inventive when it hears the words. This is about tuning its creativity to a response without clear guidelines. And again, as a test scenario, I would never think of that. But once we had the symptom, we could give it some different ideas and see what it did with it.
I don't know. I personally get the man flu, so I do feel very vulnerable when I get a cold. And I appreciate that from me. I have to recognize that. Right. There's a good question came through for yourself, Rush. It's on screen right now.
Yeah.
So how do you recommend teams balance using AI to speed up automation delivery while still protecting existing working test cases, framework structure, and traceability, especially in financial services where audit and compliance are important?
I do think source control is going to be crucial on this. I think we have code reviews, we have merge requests, we have PR requests. All of these things are still critical. Prioritize test cases that we should have. AI should not run the process from start to end. You need to have checkpoints in between. The fundamentals of software development hasn't changed. You have requirements, you do your analysis, you validate that those requirements are correct. You move on from that. You have it goes to the development team. They take those requirements, they implement it. You take it on your side. You create your test cases around those, and you then map to those. Now, you kind of want to balance those two out because these processes still need a review. You don't just write test cases and then execute them. You write test cases and have someone review. Am I covering enough? Is this enough coverage? You now have AI has the ability to go and write those test cases for you and then go and identify, is this what I would have covered? Are these the test cases? Is there anything missing here that I would cover from this perspective? Has it considered any of the regulatory requirements for the region the application is going to? Has it brought in the incorrect regulatory requirements from another country that does not apply here? These are things you need to consider because it's always a question of, am I testing too much or am I testing too little? And you kind of want to find that median. With AI, the speed's a lot faster and you're going to be overwhelmed with the amount of information. You still need a review process. You still need a validation process. And one thing I just wanted to mention when Stephen mentioned, when we say AI and it comes back to artificial intelligence, it doesn't have an understanding of the real world. So when you say someone says has flu and they hear an AI hears sick, it doesn't have a feel for what sick means. It has an implication of what it could mean in the long and the worst case scenario. As anybody who's found out they've got some sort of illness goes on to Google and checks and says, this is the worst case scenario, guess what? AI is going to do the same thing because that's what it's trained upon, and it's going to identify the worst case scenario.
And I think that's, as humans, we socialize data. If you call me Tris, I know you're referring to me. Right? You don't have to say Tristan. I know you're for whatever else you choose to call me on a daily basis. God knows. But I know you're referring to me. I think AI is very certain. It has to be Tristan. Tris is not the person that it's looking for, so to speak. But I think what that question's brought in your answer, this is another question from me. And we kind of touched on it earlier. are there certain systems you would not trust AI to test itself? You know, we mentioned, look, we touched on healthcare earlier, but we're talking about financial systems here. If I had a core banking application which handles all of my payments, handles all of my interest calculations, you know, deposits, so on and so forth, would you trust AI in its current state to test that on its own? And you talked about AI validating itself earlier, Varesh.
I did.
Are we there yet?
I don't think so. I would not.
I have
Okay.
a view as well. So I think AI is better at reviewing than it is at creation. So if I give it a framework or a specification, and I say, build me something from this, it'll go off and build a thing. If I then ask another AI, or even the same one, and I get the output from the other AI, and I feed it to that AI, and I say, now, how good is this output compared to the things I've asked it to build against? It's much better at recognizing, ooh, it deviates here, here, and here compared to what was originally provided. So I think it's better at validating content against the thing than it is at creating the thing. But to answer to my view on what would I trust it with, if you just think about it as a human being, even though we shouldn't, is would you trust an intern or a single developer to have that level of power and control to do the thing that you're asking it to do? Would a single if you use a medical example, would a single cardiologist be the only person who makes a diagnosis on a patient's cancer treatment? Or would it be a group of his peers and other individuals involved in a chain of events before that diagnosis was made? The AI is a tool in that process. It isn't a single source of truth, and there should be considered to be one.
Okay.
So I think
basically you treat it as what it is. It's in its infancy right now. That doesn't mean it's not going to mature to a stage we can use it. But if we look at it in terms of I hate doing this, but in terms of a human's career path, it's still at that junior intern level. And really it needs that guidance and those guide rails to pick it up. Or is that me totally misreading the response you gave?
You're almost there. I would go from the way I think from some of the LinkedIn posts that I've viewed and some of the people I follow. Testing has always been learning the application that you're working with. You can have all of the requirements in the world that's documented, and you can go through those requirements, and it'll be very helpful to AI, because I'll get a little bit onto that a little later. But the more you use an application, the more you test an application, the more you understand about the application. And if I'm going to give AI independence to just run through an application and it just has its requirements and outputs, it's only going to look at the requirements and the actual outputs and validate that. I still need it to understand what the system is actually doing, where it's going wrong, identify, hold on, that's an input box that should not be there, or that's something that shouldn't be selectable. Now, you can turn around and say, well, you know what, maybe the AI should have gone and validated it. But if AI is doing it independently and it chose not to validate that, hey, I can change the interest rate on my investment and I can increase it to about 25%, and go from there, you're now giving the user the ability to now influence a system that is supposed to be market related or market driven. So these are things whereby you still need a user to come in, because what I find is not all requirements are clear. And if you're trying to shoehorn unclear requirements or insufficient information into an application to test, as Stefan says, AI is better at validating than or reviewing than at generating. It'll still go ahead and generate, and it'll go into a different direction.
Okay.
And yeah,
I see the question.
Thank you.
That's right.
I'm just reading the question. I'm wondering if I can pronounce smorgasbord properly.
Smorgasbord,
yeah. You mentioned smorgasbord in your talk. Oh, we found AI's handling the use of such terms and putting that into the right context. It's an interesting word to use in that context.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. So one of the tools I'm working with at the moment, like I said, it's taking a conversation, transcribing that into written text, like you would do a Teams conversation, and then using that conversation, another data source to create reports, letters for deployment to go and do some work with. So we've definitely seen make mistakes in transcription, like using smorgasbord. It would just go, not really sure what that means. I'm just going to put something in there. But then, interestingly, further upstream, it actually doesn't necessarily use that mispronunciation and then the content is generated, because the controls on how the content is generated is much more precise and constrained than it is to versus transcribe what you've written. So if you like, especially around services, so if you mention ISAs or investment strategies, funds, bonds, etc., anything like that, the tool that I'm working with at the moment, very good at isolating those keywords and bringing them out, something that's important around the conversation. But it does struggle with more articulate language, like smorgasbord as an example.
Okay.
But if you so just let me to finish that point. So, but if you think about that as a test case or something you could do as a tester, would be, well, how much as a word conversion rate? Let's say I've got a conversation with 200 words in it. How many of those words do I need it to get accurate to before it gets the gist of the conversation? Does it need to be all 200 words, or does it need to be 180 words? So it doesn't matter that it didn't get smorgasbord. It's still got the gist of the conversation, enough to make the output that matters. So the test case becomes very different to it got the word wrong to did it get enough of the words right to give the output that I want and the quality that I want it.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical point, though. The gist of the conversation can sometimes matter. But when you're talking about things like people's finances, their ability to pay their rent, pay their mortgages, bills, healthcare, those sorts of things, how accurate do you want it to be? You want it to be as accurate as possible. I think there are some elements, if you're talking about, I don't know, Squarespace building a website using its AI assistant, it can be loose. It can get the gist and you can work with it. I think when you're dealing with people's finances, their livelihoods, essentially, their ability to put food on the table, it needs to be as accurate as possible. And what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm hearing it wrong, is that we're not necessarily all the way there yet. And we're still having to ensure that that human element is brought into the AI. And it's more about the AI enhancing what the human can do rather than replacing what the human does.
Correct.
Yeah, I think especially if the information that the AI is dealing with is human created, as in like an organic conversation between two of us, is very different to Varesh's example where I give it the code base and I ask it to do an assessment of that into a framework. It's going to be very different. In my word case example, here's a good example from a real test case that I had. And then how would you interpret it as two senior testers? The client said, I've got an investment, I'm going to make some numbers up. I've got an investment fund of between 50,000 and 65,000. What number would you ask the AI to produce? So it could be, is it the bottom end of the range? Is it the top end of the range? Is it bang in the middle? Is it an average? Is it a band? Is it an upper and lower limit? Do a round up? Do a round down? All these questions a human being is naturally going to go, I wonder what they meant by that. Maybe some follow-on questions or some clarification on what that meant. AI is just going to go, well, I've got all these criteria I can assess that from. I'm going to pick one. I'm going to give it that. It's a really good example of how that test case becomes quite difficult and challenging because of all the different conditions you create at the back of it.
Okay. True. Right. So we've got 5 minutes left. I'm hoping people have some questions and we can fill the time. In the meantime, I'm going to ask what I hate asking, and it's more of a binary question. Okay. It's a would you or wouldn't you? Is AI a good thing in testing? And I know that is incredibly binary. I'll give you my position first, right? I think it is. I think it's wonderful, to be honest with you. I think it brings an element of speed and ability to research and gain knowledge incredibly quickly and help put that knowledge down on paper, so to speak. What are your views?
I actually want to go next. So I actually prepped something for this originally, and it's weird that you asked the question because I didn't expect it. I was like, no one's going to ask us, is AI good? But yeah, so I agree with you. I say yes, it is a good thing. It does help you automate repetitive, well-documented tasks quite well. It helps people learn new things, especially if you're coming to automation. And, well, you know what? In general, if you want to learn something and if you want to come up with a small little schedule, AI is fantastic for that. It's brilliant, and it'll get you to where you need to be. If you're starting a new automation project from scratch, AI is amazing. It'll get you the fundamentals, the building blocks, all the components you need set up fairly quickly. Where I find AI is not so good is when things are ambiguous, when you're trying to shoehorn content that is unclear into something that you want to be specifically done within a space of time. AI can do it quickly, but it's not going to do it accurately. And whereas we're talking financial services here, accuracy is critical. If it was healthcare or something to that effect, it's even more critical. So my opinion would be, I wouldn't trust it independently. I think it will make things quicker. I think it needs to be used as fit for purpose. I think in existing systems, you need guardrails to protect what you already have. And then you can look at optimizing once you have a solid code base, or you could run the projects in parallel to make sure things are working. But the fundamental of it is AI is an LLM with a harness that sits on top of it, which means all it is a word predictor. And very often you're going to get an answer that is the most popular answer. And I'm going to go into this example because I did this 3 years ago. I tested an example whereby I knew the answer on Stack Overflow was the third option because I knew the first option never worked, even though everybody gave that this is the right answer. It didn't work for me. And AI, when I asked it to go and figure this out, gave me that first answer. It gave me the most popular answer. Even though it had all of the context, exactly what I was trying to do, it had the entire code base and where I was trying to get to, and it still gave me the first answer it found, because AI will try to get to the answer as quickly as it can. Unless you've got the expensive thinking model, and we haven't even spoken about cost yet, so we'll come to that later.
So what I'm hearing is, well, I don't think we'll get to cost takes far too long to talk about. Make it into the end of this chat, unfortunately. So what I'm hearing is, yes, it's a good thing, but be cautious from yourself. Great.
Precisely.
And Stephen, where do you stand on it?
I'll maybe play devil's advocate. So I'm going to say I don't think this is my actual answer, but I'm going to argue for a no on why I think testing services like ours are more important than ever. Is that I've got a tool now that can accelerate everything I'm doing. I can give it some requirements, I can give it some software, and it'll create a test case. And then I can go off and get someone who's never tested before in their life to run the test case, and everything's great. It's amazing. Look how much time and money I've spent, I've saved. It doesn't take away the fact you need to critically think about the thing that it's doing, the context it's doing, and the thing you're trying to achieve. Testers at their core are critical thinkers, and they can tear a solution or a problem statement into pieces and come up with what is the appropriate response. AI isn't quite there yet in my head in terms of critical thinking aspects like a human being does. It doesn't do that to the same degree. So all you're going to end up with is potentially lots and lots of content, lots of stuff that we've made, and the quality is very poor. So the argument between quality and speed that we have in software development, there's two opposing forces diametrically against each other. Well, AI is given the speed element a real rocket booster, right? I can produce content and code like you would not believe. I can build websites in seconds. What happens to quality? That force is just as important. So I think in that context, it's not necessarily a good thing because quality isn't the main consideration with AI. Speed is.
I think
that's
I'll still use it. I just have one thing to say on that, and something that's actually been proven. Pushing code out faster doesn't produce more money. Pushing quality code out faster with quality features makes more money. And that's a fact.
Okay. Right. So we scratched the surface of what AI means in QA. And I think it's always very difficult to try and think of exactly what people want to hear, but what I would encourage anybody who's listening to this and interested in the subject and wants to talk further on anything we've seen as a firm is to reach out to us through LinkedIn or through whatever means you've got. We even take pigeon messages, but would be more than happy to discuss any of what you've heard today in further detail. So, without further ado, I do believe that's us. Thank you for joining us today. It is appreciated. And as I say, reach out if there's anything you'd like to touch on further. And thank you, Varesh and Stephen.
Thank you so much.